So next we've got retired Senator Damon Thayer, who is being inducted today. Come on up
Come on
here.
up. How are you, sir?
Hello, sir. Let's put that right
Yeah,
front
right
and
in front
center.
and center. How are you? I'm Chris. Absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining
Good
us.
to see you again.
Good to see you.
Good.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
How exciting is this for you?
Well, I never thought I'd be in the hall of anything, so this is pretty cool. I have to admit. Look, I just wanted to remove artificial barriers to free enterprise when I was in the Kentucky State Senate, and I was in a good spot with a bunch of like-minded legislators who looked at all these barriers that were put up for the bourbon industry. After Prohibition was repealed, states were able to enact their own alcohol laws, and Kentucky enacted a lot of them, and they were pretty restrictive. And so, we've spent the last 10 or 12 years removing a lot of those barriers, and it's nice to be recognized for it. But I stand on the shoulders of a lot of people, a lot of like-minded people in both parties in the Kentucky General Assembly who saw things the way I did about helping to unleash the absolute economic giant that the bourbon industry has become.
When you started working on all these different legislative changes, did you see the future of what it is today, what bourbon has become? And like, we have Hall of Fame awards, and we have people waiting out in line to meet some of these people. Did you predict that?
Well, Eric Gregory told me it would be that way.
Oh, okay.
So,
As he does.
I had to believe him, but you could see it. I mean, because the foundation has been here for such a long time, with the great heritage that the bourbon industry has in Kentucky, and you could see that it just needed a little bit of a boost. I mean, just simple things like being able to serve a cocktail at a distillery, to be able to have a restaurant,
Yes.
to be able to sell more than a couple bottles of bourbon out of a gift shop. I mean, that was Senate Bill 11 that removed a lot of those restrictions back in 2015, and you could just see a lot of these sort of just ridiculous restrictions
Yes.
on commerce. And we already knew that people were coming here for the Bourbon Trail, and you could sense that bourbon was on the ascent. And it's become a cool thing to be a part of. And we reached a tipping point where we just started passing these bills, and the industry just has flourished and gone from strength to strength ever since.
And when I go out and do speaking and talk to people, and I talk about Senate Bill 11, which we probably should have come up with a sexier name than that, because I describe the bill as absolutely magical. Because you could imagine walking into a brewery and not being able to get a beer, or a winery and not being able to get a glass of wine. That is what that bill did for us.
Yeah, it was sponsored by Senator John Schickel, my colleague from Boone County, who chaired the Licensing and Occupations Committee, with the Vice and Sin Committee, because that's where all the gambling and alcohol bills went. We called it the Fun Committee. And John did a great job with that bill. KDA did a great job advocating for it. And it seems so amazing that for 10 years ago you couldn't even get a cocktail at a distillery until that bill passed. So I was the one, by the way, who made it Senate Bill 11. We always had a top 10 set of policy bills every year in the Kentucky State Senate that pretty much everybody agreed upon in the Kentucky Republican Senate majority. And then after that, as majority leader, I could pretty much assign bills whatever number I wanted. So I went up to Senator Schickel one day and I said, "You're going to file that bill today, right?" He said, yes, today's the day. I said, "Okay, you're going to like the number it gets," because I wanted it to have the first one outside the top 10. So Senate Bill 11, that's a little bit of history there for you.
Oh, that's a great story.
That's
a little
great.
inside.
I love that.
A little inside Senate scoop there for you.
I like that.
What do you think future Hall of Famers are going to remember you for, thank you for, and of what you did to get us to where we were?
I'm a loyal guy, and I hope people remember me for my loyalty, whether it's to my kids or to my conservative philosophies, or the industries that I love, and that would be horse racing and bourbon, and loyalty to my friends. And so I'm hopeful that, look, I just had a few strokes on a masterpiece here, just a small role, but I hope people think of me for my loyalty to this industry, as well as to the other things and the people and the principles I believe in. Loyalty cuts both ways, And, I appreciate the fact that in my first year of eligibility, the KDA was loyal enough to me to put me into the Hall of Fame. I can't believe I'm going in with people with names like Morris and Beam into a group of people with names like Bill Samuels and
rock stars,
absolute rock stars. And I'm just humbled and honored to be a small part of it.
But the Hall of Fame is about people who have had a transformative impact on this industry, and you can't argue that you haven't.
Well, look, it was a great run, and I appreciate you saying that. I slayed a lot of dragons, and but the thing about serving in the Kentucky General Assembly is one person can't take credit. John F. Kennedy Jr. once said, "Victory has 1,000 fathers, failure is an orphan." And the success of the bourbon industry today is due to a lot of people. And in my case, as a legislator, it's due to the other individuals in the House and in the Senate in both parties who voted for these bills, who co-sponsored these bills, who sponsored these bills, who testified on their behalf. And because it's a lot easier to pass an alcohol bill today than it was 10 years ago. And we had to fight and scrap and claw and put together bipartisan coalitions. But, things are changing culturally, and you look at all these wet dry votes in rural counties where you never thought a wet dry vote would go wet. The attitudes are really changing culturally. So it's become easier to pass alcohol related bills than 10, 12 years ago when Eric and Chris Nolan were coming into my office saying, okay, we really got to get this passed, and here's why. And I said, look, this is going to be hard. But not impossible. But not impossible.
Do you remember the first bill, or first time someone brought something to you and that you read it about this industry and said you're going to champion for this industry because the bills were kind of crazy, the laws were kind of nuts? Do you remember the first time that it stuck out to you?
Yeah, 100%. It was the 2009 hidden wholesale tax that Governor Steve Beshear proposed, that Republicans in the Senate actually passed, and I voted no on it. Stood up on the floor of the Kentucky State Senate, and I gave a very angry speech. I had a big old chip on my shoulder for the bourbon business, and I didn't even drink bourbon back then.
Really? You just didn't like the tax?
I didn't think it was fair to put a hidden wholesale tax on one of Kentucky's signature industries that was trying to grow. I mean, you could start to see that the bourbon boom was coming. Trying to break through, and we're going to put an additional tax on it. It was a terrible idea, and in the Republican Senate caucus, members don't usually vote no against bills that leadership brings to the floor. I wasn't in leadership then. And so for me to buck leadership and go against that bill, and I tried to talk people out of it behind the scenes and in a caucus meeting, but it had the votes to go. The Democrats were for it because it was a proposal by their governor, Steve Beshear. But I gave a very angry speech that day. And one of the things that made me mad was that it forced the bourbon barons to come to the Kentucky State Capitol and actually spill bourbon on the steps of the Kentucky State Capitol.
We still have the pictures.
It was heartbreaking, and I didn't even drink bourbon back then. But I just thought, it was such a waste. But they made a great point that day. But it was, even though that bill passed, it was a turning point for me, because then I became a bourbon advocate. I became a bourbon advocate on that day, but also even though the bill passed and the industry was against it, the industry never suffered a loss again in the Kentucky General Assembly. So it was a turning point that day, and to nothing but good things ever since. And wow. who knows? Maybe future General Assembly will get smart and get rid of that hidden wholesale tax, because it's not fair to consumers, and it's certainly not fair to all the people that the bourbon industry employs.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I got one last question.
Yes.
Before we close it out, what's better, a pour of Kentucky Senator or a lap on the Royal Ascot?
Well, of course, as the co-founder of Kentucky Senator Bourbon, I'd have to say that it's better.
There we go.
But I got to tell you, going to Royal Ascot is pretty cool. But you know what the big problem is? They don't drink enough bourbon over there in England.
I would agree with that.
I've got to find a distributor.
Do you know
find a
people?
distributor.
Hey, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and congratulations.
And thank you for
So
being
well
such a
deserved.
champion for the industry.
It was an honor and a privilege.
You enjoy your day. This
Thanks,
is
I
about.
will.
Oh, and happy birthday! Is that correct?
Oh, that's right.
It
Happy
is.
birthday.
Happy birthday!
We'll have a poor Kentucky senator later just to celebrate the birthday.
Cheers to that. Eric was so nice to schedule this on my birthday.
I know
Yes.
it was
well,
nice.
you know, it really festive.
Thank you so
made it real
much.
festive
Thanks,
for
It
us.
was an absolute pleasure.
All right, thank you.
We can't wait to hear your stories up there.
Thanks.
Take care, Damon.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.